Welcome to the next session of the True Methods MSP Accelerator brought to you by SolarWinds MSP. I'm Bob Penland, joined by Gary Pica. And this lesson is the MSP framework. Hey, Gary.
Hey Bob, how are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Okay, so we're moving along here, and we reviewed the VCIO process. Now we're going to give an overview of how we look at this business and build a framework. Then we'll go on to some really key things around packaging, pricing, and then sales.
Good.
So again, just to recap, so far we've defined what we call the MSP value stack. So a way of looking at the business to see where you need to spend your time and have process built in order to be able to attract the right customers, command the right prices, and drive scalability and profitability. We reviewed in detail the process around the standards, alignment, impact, and strategy. That's our technology alignment and our VCIO process. So next, we're going to explain a framework that allows you to deliver consistent results to customers while maximizing your profitability. And the main thing is it's a way you can look at the business. This coupled what we're going to do with the pricing model is a framework for you to look at the business that really connects your biggest cost, Bob, your people. It connects them to top line revenue and it connects them to your average cost so that you can make a complex business more simple in terms of decision making and how to prioritize things. That's the secret of the framework. That's how you get to become a high performing MSP that is at 18, 20, 25% net profit margins rather than an average that is in the 10 to 14% range.
Good.
So here's the basis of it. Okay, it starts with service delivery, and we've defined service delivery areas, five of them. And the concept of a service delivery area, and we're going to go through each of them, is that if you think about your service delivery, your technical delivery, you should be able to put everyone into one of these delivery areas. So all the services that you provide, all the roles you have should fall into these. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and talk through each of these. Then we'll talk about the concept of how they relate to revenue. And then eventually, when we talk about pricing, we'll use the same concept of these delivery areas in this framework of how they relate to what your costs are and your seat cost in the business. And when you combine those two views, I call it the macro and the micro view, it gives really turns this business, Bob, into a math problem,
Yeah.
right?
Just one big, beautiful math problem,
Yeah,
right?
and it's going to take all the guesswork out of the decisions that you make, and we'll get down to just really three key drivers that can influence and impact the entire model that you can focus on. And when you move those in the right direction, you'll get amazing results in as you scale your practice. So, Bob, let's start with I'll say the simplest one, right? Professional
Yeah,
service.
I think this is classic IT company, right? You professional services. They're the role that delivers your technology implementation. They're also the role that is your level three support. They're your subject matter experts, right?
Yeah.
They implement new technology. They provide some guidance for your standards library. So we talked about standards library and technical alignment. They provide some of that technical guidance and leadership, right? So they should be your senior people. Your senior engineers are in your professional services role, and generally they're billable, right? They're
That's
doing
the goal.
things, they're doing hourly billable service, billable projects.
Yeah, and we used to call them, our SWAT team, right? They would take care of everything, but they would make
Yeah.
everybody else better too. You said technical leadership, so issues come up on the support desk. These are the people that those support desk resources look to, and they're involved in standards because they have deep knowledge of things. These are the guys that are
Hmm.
they're implementing multiple Cisco routers in different situations
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
month, and they're implementing your firewall strategies, and so there's a good source to go for standards because they're doing a lot of the implementations.
Yep.
Next is support. So, I mean, this is kind of, again, like professional services, this is the part of the business that we we've all been in before managed services, right? Are one of the reasons
Yeah, yeah.
not all of our customers hire us for this reason. Some of the larger ones don't, but for the most part, our average customer, this is one of the reasons they hire us.
Well, and I would say they're related, and especially if we came from a break fix type organization, what we see a lot is these two roles kind of mixed, but they are separate delivery
Yes.
areas in our organization. Support is number one, it's your remote support. We do a lot of that remotely now, but also some on-site support
Yeah.
if it's included in our service, right? In our package, in our pricing. So we're talking about that now. Support is a specific delivery area. They do your tickets. They handle the alerts that come in, the reactive type service. And Gary, we have on there bottom of the stack. This is something that every MSP needs to do. You need to answer the phone or answer your email and fix stuff. That's support, right?
Yeah, and you need to meet customers' expectations and do it well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we tell at our MSP, we tell them how critical they are, but we also let them know, listen, we don't keep customers because you do a good job, because that's what customers expect. We only lose them if you don't,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so, you know, you're not going to create a huge competitive advantage on this. You're just going to create a problem in your business if you don't handle it well.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to centralized services. And now we're starting to get into some of that core foundational MSP things, which is centralized services is all of the things you deliver from a central location. You know, the core of it would be your automation, things you're doing with your RMM, backup, security, cloud features, hosted apps, hosted infrastructure. It's a wide variety of things that people would do from here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's everything software services infrastructure delivered centrally. We got some of the stuff listed there, but you can think of all the different cloud things. There's that centralized services too. Um,
And
yeah,
this is
and
the area that's grown the most, Bob. I mean, over time as a MSP, this has grown. And when we get to the section of not just packaging, but when we look at pricing, you'll see how much more of a role it plays in our seat cost today. Our tools cost are, or if you look at it as a percentage of your revenue, it's much higher today than it ever was.
hmm
Right.
absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So I think everybody gets that. Technology alignment. So we reviewed this in detail, right? This idea of building a standards library that includes your standards as well as some industry compliance guidelines, regularly doing the alignment reviews, and really creating that technical relationship with the customer. We still want to have a technical relationship. So this is someone who will many times deal with, the point of contact, and they deal with some of the users as well. So they build kind of that personal relationship, right?
Yeah, and this is one of those touch points where there is a personal relationship built. It's built around the technology alignment side.
Yeah.
Um, and this is where we continue to have a good relationship with our clients. I mean, they'll interact with our support desk, right? But they're not responsible. Our support desk supports everyone. This is where we're going to have, some dedicated resources that are going to
Yes.
know a lot about that client and have a relationship
Right.
with them.
They each manage, someone in this role would manage a subset of your clients.
Yep.
And then the VCIO. Again, this is something we talked through in a prior video in detail, but they're building on that alignment and they're seeing what's out of alignment, and they're the ones that are doing those impact assessments. So things are out of alignment. What's the impact? Based on this specific business, having those conversations to build a strategic, IT roadmap for every customer. And this is the business relationship, right? So on the technical alignment side, it's more of the technical relationship, user relationship. This is the business relationship that we look to build. So we want to talk about an important concept that we call leverage. I mean, this is kind of the center of a lot of the things in our training. Is that you in a service related business, you have to recreate relationships between hours and dollars. So service revenue per employee, per tech, and eventually to support that per delivery role. And the idea here, Bob, okay, is that the way to increase margins is you need to increase the amount of service revenue per month or per year relative to your payroll, the number of people. And it used to be easy, Bob, because we knew what we paid a tech. Before we used to bill monthly, and we knew what our hourly rate was, and we knew how many hours they billed. That was the
Right.
relationship. How many hours can one person bill? And although that model wasn't as profitable as the MSP model when it's done right, we need to create that same type of environment where we can connect people um, to revenue,
Right.
and that's part of the framework. So let's give an example, and then we'll talk through the framework. So an average MSP with 10 employees, okay, probably has around $1 million of just service revenue, whether it's recurring or non-recurring, not hardware and resale of tools, just service revenue. Um, so if you divide that, that means they generate about $100,000 of annual service revenue per employee. We set a target for world-class companies, and it's a target. It is not a speed limit. Today, our current MSP is above this, right? We're above these leverage numbers, but this
Right.
is a target that we sent of 150,000 per employee. So that same 10 employee MSP would generate 1.5 million in annual services. So there's that average MSP has $500,000 annually of unrealized profitability locked in their business, and they don't know how to get it out because they don't have a framework. They don't know the math that allows them to see what levers they have to pull, what drivers they have to focus on to be able to get that out. So here's one thing we like to do, a little exercise everyone watching can do. What's your unrealized profitability? So take the number of employees in your business. When I say that, like everyone who's involved in your IT business, okay? Not just the techs, everyone, because you have to pay everyone, and multiply that by $150,000, and then subtract from that what your actual annual service revenue is. And that number is your unrealized profitability. And we like to call that process that we're going to talk about now, the framework, Bob, finding the hole in the bucket. Okay, where is it and how do we get it? And so if
Mhm.
you want higher profit margins, right, but you drive leverage, we're a people-based business. So we have to figure out how to generate more service revenue. And it's not that simple without a framework when you figure, you charge someone three or four or $5,000 a month, and you have a bunch of different roles and people all doing different things for them every day, Bob, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you want more service revenue per employee, then what we need to do is create this framework where you need to relate every employee, all the functions, right, into roles. And this way you can make the right decisions. So let's go back and look at our 5 delivery areas a little differently and think through the logic on each of them. So the first one is professional services. As you said, Bob, for the most part, this is a billable role. So these are mainly projects that are done outside of your monthly fee, your managed service fee to your customer. And so with that, the drivers there are simple. How much do you charge per hour, and what's your utilization rate? So, you know, you can't change anything else, right? So if you can raise your rate from 150 to 160, that'll raise the leverage for these folks. Or you
Right.
can make sure that they're billing all of their hours and are not involved in escalations and other things that are not, billable outside the agreement, right?
Yep.
That's pretty
Yep.
much it. So
That's it.
we move on to centralized services. This should be a fully proactive role. So their job is to manage, deploy, and execute on your tool set. Again, starting with your RMM, and then all the other things, remote backup tools, all things that we talk about, and we'll talk about in more detail in the packaging section. And really, here, what drives the amount of revenue that a resource like this can touch is how many endpoints or end users can they manage, and then what do you charge? What's your average all-in seat price? Your average price, that you charge based on the number of seats that they have, and this is a real scalable part of the business, Bob, right? And so if you don't have these people dealing with tickets and alerts, you're sending all that to support, as we recommend. One person can manage. I mean, we had 7,000 endpoints in our first MSP, and we had one person that could still manage that because it's basically, your ConnectWise Automate server doesn't care whether it's patching 50 computers or it's patching 5,000.
Yeah, it's a highly leverageable position. Again, so long as you're doing the proactive part of it, it's the deployment and management of the tools, not the
Yeah,
fixing stuff that comes as a result of using them. That's the where I think
absolutely.
people get hung up. We want to put
I
all that
agree.
into support, like you
Yep.
said.
Next one is the role we went through in detail around technology alignment. And again, this is a 100% proactive role. So this is all these three things. This is our top of the stack type stuff. So they're proactive. So we control how much revenue they can touch. And it's based on how many clients can one resource around technology alignment manage. And then what's our average MRR? In other words, how much on average does each of those clients spend? So we can tell you that in practice, the number's around 20 clients, okay? So they can manage around 20 clients. So if your average client size is, $2,000 a month, then they can touch about 40,000 of MRR. But if it's 3,000 a month, they can touch 60,000. So that's why that
Right.
average MRR number, in our current MSP, Bob, our average client size is over $4,000. And so that's one of the big ways you increase margins and leverage because they manage about the same amount of accounts, but they're worth a lot more. And VCIO is the same way. They have the same leverage points. The only difference here is that if you're doing technology alignment and you're giving that review information and handing it to VCIO, they can manage a lot more clients, like usually twice as many. So a VCIO should be able to manage, 35 to 45 customers. And again, based on your average MRR, that will tell you what that leverage number is or how much revenue they can touch. So one of these is billable, three are proactive. So the good news is, if you have a process where they're managing the right number of clients and you're priced right at the right clients, what that relationship between each of these roles and revenue is going to be in your business. We control it, and that's how you drive margins is by controlling those things. But the last one, Bob, is support. This is where we send all of our tickets and alerts, all the requests.
Yep.
And that's very variable, Bob. Okay? Very variable. And it has two main drivers. One is obviously, each support resource can manage so many seats. So the higher your all in seat price or your seat price, the more revenue they can touch. But the real big driver beyond that is something
Mhm.
we're going to talk about called REM, reactive hours per endpoint per month, which is a measurement of how many reactive hours you have per endpoint that determines really what the leverage is in this, and it varies so greatly from one
Yeah.
MSP to the next.
Yeah, so if you've ever wondered how many endpoints one support desk person can support, we're going to give you the answer
Hmm.
right now.
Absolutely, we're going to give it to you today, and the fact that you have control over it.
Yeah.
So Bob, can you
Yes,
take us
yeah.
through? This is a really important number. We call
Yep.
it REM, reactive hours per endpoint per month. Explain to people what it is, and then we're going to give them some examples and a graph to show why it's so important and is at the center of your business, your value, and your MSP practice.
Yep. So if you take the total amount of time that you've spent solving reactive tickets, and you divide that by the total number of end users you support, then you will get the reactive hours per end user per month. So total time entered on the reactive tickets in a given month divided by the number of end users, that gives you reactive hours per end user per month. And this is a good gauge on how much reactive service that you're required to do as part of your managed services agreements.
Yeah, and so there's 2 points I want to make on this, Bob. The first is when we say reactive tickets, we mean all of your tickets and alerts. And think of it this way, because some of them you might think are proactive, but from a business standpoint, they're reactive. Okay. This is all the stuff, okay, that you need to do as part that's not in one of those proactive roles that you can't bill for. For example, if you include new workstation builds, okay, and you don't charge for them, that's reactive time, Bob.
It's yeah,
Because
reactive meaning yeah, included
you
services.
have to
Yeah.
react to their request,
Yep.
and you have to pay for the labor to do it as part of that fixed fee per month.
Right.
All
Right.
of your monitoring alerts that you have to open and put time on, you have to react to those, and you're not billing for them. It's part of your monthly fee. So all of that goes in the REM, Bob.
Yep. All of that labor goes in there. Yes.
Okay. And the reason we use endpoints or end users per month is that gives us a common denominator. So you can look at it whether you just manage 50 end users or whether you manage 500 or 5,000. That's why it gives us something that we can really align with. So here's the graph, Bob.
Yeah. So if your REM, your reactive hours per end user per month, is an hour, you do this calculation, it comes out to an hour. That means every support resource can support 140 end users.
Yep.
Okay. Now um, we're using the amount of time that they have available in a month, right? For a full-time resource. So if it's a half hour REM, then they can support 280. If it's 15 minutes, they can support 560. And what we're saying is if you're not in this C column or better, you're going to have a tough time being able to move up the value stack because more of your service is going to be put towards reactive service. You're not going to be able to charge enough, and you're not going to be able to have enough time to be able to deliver those high value services, right?
Yeah, so we'll give people the concept here, but we're going to revisit this in the pricing section, and we're really going to dig into a lot more of the implications of REM, how it impacts your cost, how it impacts your ability to create value. But here, we want to introduce the framework, leverage, matching roles to revenue, and give this concept here, Bob.
Yeah, so the low value provider, they spend more of their time on low value services, reactive stuff, right? Fixing problems and doing basic moves, adds, and changes. That's low value stuff. That's bottom of the stack activities. They don't have as much time available to work on the high value things, the proactive services that we highlighted. Whereas the high value provider, they have lower requirements on REM, meaning they don't spend as many hours per endpoint per month fixing things or doing moves, adds, or changes. They spend more of their hours per endpoint per month on high value services, VCIO, technology alignment, and centralized services.
And think of it this way: most people, we get to see a lot of numbers of people's, smart. We call them smart numbers around the world. A lot of MSPs, and give or take, most people have about an hour of available technical resource time per month per endpoint, give or take. That's a ballpark, okay?
Yep.
And we meet people all the time. When we meet them, before they put people in defined roles, really start to separate proactive from reactive, put the alignment and strategy process in place, they're 45 minutes to an hour REM. And so they have very little time, really. Everybody's doing tickets, as opposed to people that get down under a half hour, between 15 minutes and a half hour. They're the ones that are commanding that price. They're the ones that are commanding a seat price that's 20, 30, $40 higher. So again, we'll go to packaging and pricing after this. And when we talk about pricing, we'll really give you all the underlying math and how it relates to your cost, Bob, and
Good.
really show you what's left
Yep.
and how valuable you are. So, stepping back, let's put this whole thing together. So we showed you the value stack and said you need to build functions at and process at the top of the stack for alignment and impact and building that strategic, business relationship. And to do that, we want to create delivery areas and have roles in process that are specifically aimed as that. So we have our 5 delivery areas. We know what the relationship is between revenue and roles for each and what the drivers are. And we use that process, we call it your superpower, around alignment and VCIO to to people will take your recommendations, so it drives up your professional services revenue, and it's going to drive down that reactive time or REM. And when that goes down, your average all-in seat price and your average MRR, those two key drivers that drive leverage, are going to rise. And when that happens, noise goes down and those averages go up. It makes a huge change on your profitability and your scalability pretty quickly, Bob.